random live streams. And I'm trying to wait till this thing populates on YouTube. They're so look at this. Oh, it's finally live. Oh, look at that. I thought I was live that whole time. I get, man, I'm telling you, the Zionist technology lords, man, you're not beating the charges. You are not beating the charges, and YouTube has manifested itself as a weapon of suppression. I get it though. I'm more long form content. And I did this Copilot. I actually just started really using Copilot because I got a new computer. And, I like Copilot. I think that if you're a highly analytical person like me, you're going to like that tool. And so I asked Copilot, I'm like, just, based off my online presence and just the things that I do online, you know, basically what kind of content creator am I? Like, how do my audiences perceive me? And then, even what type of audience do I attract? And Copilot was really cool about analyzing Facebook and YouTube and kind of looking at reoccurring patterns of my content and just doing an assessment based off of things that I already knew, but it was kind of cool to see the AI kind of validate what I already knew. So, some of us are very smart and intelligent people. We don't need AI. And I think my conflict sometimes with AIs is that it's an insult to my intelligence to use it. Like, if I'm a creative writer, I can't let the AI write for me because then I'm not using my own neural pathways to think. And that to me creates neuroplasticity over time, and the brain just does not function. And I think that's what's going on with a lot of people and populations. How are you, Nick? Damn, I haven't seen you in a while. I know, man. I've been so inconsistent. Well, people who follow this channel, they know I'm so random, but the written content, I do try to stay consistent with that. But I y'all know me. It got to be something really bumping. Even that Israel Iran stuff, I just couldn't just sit there and religiously follow that stuff. I did religiously check into the Israel Iran conflict. I think the Young Turks has been. They've actually surprised me with their reporting because I do feel like it's it's obviously, I feel like it's hard for me to kind of get into the commentators of these conflicts because you have this so-called pro-Israel, pro-Zionist side, and then you have this anti-Israel, anti-Zionist side, and there's so much bias riddled in all of this commentary that you really have to do your own research, understand history beyond even what people are projecting to you, and even what your religion is projecting to you, because I feel like a lot of people are being manipulated by these conversations, and they don't really understand. I don't think they really understand, to me, the more spiritual aspect of this conflict. These governments will swear up and down that they are atheists, but these people are doing things based off of spiritual, and Satanism is spiritual. Whether you are of the Holy Spirit or the unholy Spirit, Satanism is a spiritual premise. And a lot of these people are Satanists. A lot of these people are Satanists. And I think a lot of people, it's easier for them to believe, excuse me, that these type of forces of people do not exist among us. But these people have been ruling worlds and societies for centuries, like for millenniums. And and so when you talk about Israel and you talk about all of this geopolitical stuff, I mean, it's so much deeper than the regular person. I feel like really understands, and you truly have to be governed by the Supreme Court of Judgment in your own mind about what these people are saying. They're wise, because to me, we're looking at genocide. We're seeing people, cities, populated civilian cities just be cluster bombed in certain instances. And the United States, we are supposed to be the police of the world, and we're enabling a lot of genocides. And so America has turned 250 years old, and it just started making me just reflect on this country yesterday. And I was telling my kids, we were riding down 8 Mile coming from my sister's house, and we don't celebrate Fourth of July. We're not patriots. We are Americans. We are generations of Americans, but we don't celebrate patriotism. It is a demonic spirit because you have an allegiance to a nation. And unfortunately, in our household, our allegiance is only to Yahuwah and his son Yahusha, the King in heaven. And so, you know, but I do put the country in perspective. And for me, I was driving down and, I told my kids, like, look, we don't celebrate 4th of July, right? But, we are still grateful. We're still grateful for this notion of freedom that we have as Americans. And as we're riding down 8 Mile, I feel like 8 Mile is like probably like the best fireworks show because everybody in Detroit they're competing to see who has the best fireworks. So, but there's a freedom in Americans being allowed to do that when so many people from other countries are not allowed to do that. And so, I don't even think a lot of those people were per se celebrating the 4th of July. They were just celebrating their freedoms on their land, on their property, whatever they invested in, not harming anybody, staying in their lane. And that's really, to me, the foundation of what America stands for. And we're so far removed from that. We have manipulated freedom now. That's what Americans have. We have manipulated freedom because there's no freedom in the existence of a property tax. To me, I feel like property taxes are unconstitutional. People make the argument, well, you got to support your local school district, your municipality. Okay, whatever. I still think that the way that this nation has I feel like Americans forgot about the Boston Tea Party. Like, I mean, we're celebrating 250 years of this nation's existence, and we have literally forgot what people had to fight for this nation to exist, how it did in its founding, right? We forgot about the Boston Tea Party. We are letting these folks, and they're not all Zionists, they're just, a lot of these people are just greedy people that want relevance in the world. But we've allowed these people to manipulate laws, create these agencies that rape us of natural freedoms, right? Because if you don't pay your property taxes, do you get to keep the house that you invested your life savings in? Do you get to keep that house if you don't pay them property taxes? So you really don't own anything. The whole notion of ownership has been fucked up by all these little systems that they have created. And it's like, when I reflect on America at its 250th year of existence, one thing that really just befuddles me is the race wars and the ability for the government to MK Ultra these populations of people, the American people, into continuous ideological race wars. Like, that is like the craziest thing to me right now. And so it's like I've been kind of following this whole, you have these African and Caribbeans. I'm looking at content, and I don't know if this is AI. This could be AI perpetuating these racist type of comments to me, particularly as a Black American woman, because they're like, you're going to want to see this. You're going to want to see this African woman talking shit about Black people, or this African or Caribbean man talking shit about Black Americans, right? And that's going to infuse in you the mindset that, when Trump wants to do mass deportation of those people because they're not foundational Black Americans, you gonna not give a fuck about it. And what do you know? Lots of Black people don't give a fuck about it, right? And I think when you get into more deeper conversations, right? A lot of black people, it's like it's one of those things where we don't care about these folks being here. Some of us, we don't care about immigrants. Like, I don't think on a normal day of things that's really on black people's mind, immigrants is not on our roster, right? It just really isn't. I don't know any black person in my circle or any connected circles that I associate with that talk about black immigrants or black looking immigrants. The only time we are actually talking about them or framing them is when they're talking shit about black Americans. Because you cannot come to our playground and talk shit. And so, because if you do, when these white supremacists that have held all of us down, whether we're black, white, Puerto Rican, and Haitian, these Zionist people, when they start doing their little slick shit or whatever, it's really going to impact everybody. All right. It really is. It don't even freaking matter. So this racism stuff is crazy to me. This country is 250 years old and it's still dealing with like racial ideological issues. Like, make that shit make sense. And it is perpetuated by the government and the media and whatever hidden MK Ultra. I've been saying MK. Anybody who's conscious have been talking about the ongoing perpetuation of MK Ultra. They did not stop that program. They figured out a way to infuse it in the media and in the music and all kinds of shit. And I'm going to get to the music because right now, black people, India Ari made some comments about Young Miami's little anthem to thieves. And she's getting a lot of backlash for that. But, like I was telling people, music is the Pied Piper to many behaviors. My music can make you who, a regular righteous person in the right situation, they could fall into sin. Music, movies, they are Pied Pipers to behaviors. These kids engaging in these violent ass video games and stuff like that, they've been studying that shit for years. They know how it psychologically impacts these young boys, just like this drill rap music and all of this kill your brother music that the music industry promotes. There's a lot of conscious black rap, hip hop music that is not popular because it's not selling what they want to sell. They want to sell black men talking about killing other black men. That is part of the MK Ultra mind control. So then when they drop off crates of ammunition in these at-risk neighborhoods, right? They know exactly what they're doing. These young boys, 15, 14, talking about they shooting with switches. You know what I mean? You got guns with drum kits on them. These poor ass little niggas can't afford that. Somebody is getting that stuff to them so that they can be in these neighborhoods killing each other. So MK Ultra has not stopped. They just figured out a slick way to keep the mind control going vicariously through the media. Caribbean people don't look at being black negatively. They don't know any different because black is normal in their society. And I think, again, black is a racial construct because, again, when you think about all of us, really, who like, I am a foundational black American woman, but I'm sure if you take my face profile to the Caribbean or to Africa, you're going to find it or something somewhat similar, not exactly, right? I mean, so it's one of those things where it is a cultural thing. It's a culture thing. And I think the problem that some black Americans have with some black looking people that come over here is it's a culture thing, really, because they come over here with their culture, right? We already have our established culture and subcultures they only get to see the subcultures, which tends to be negative. And so they make their assessments about how involved they want to be with Black Americans based off of the subcultures that are projected. But the, I think if people knew the fabric of Black America, we are very family based people. We do what we need to do to survive for our family. And I know a lot of Black people, they like that. We struggle together, we fight together. We may fight with each other, but let somebody outside come in and start dissing. It's like we all together now. And I think, Black togetherness is a fear for many people in this nation because, again, you look at this Asian boycott right now, and you got Asian businesses who are suffering. And they are admitting that they did not realize that Black people had as much buying power as they do. And even when you're talking about boycotts like Target and Home Depot, I go to my local Home Depot all the time. I go to Target sometimes. There are a lot of Black people that frequent those businesses. So you take those customers out of the equation, and no, business is not going to go out of business. It's not going to collapse. I don't even think that generally is the point of a lot of these boycotts, is to put a dent in your bottom line so that you understand which group not to piss off. Jewish people do this shit all the time. If every other group operated like Jewish people did, right, they'd be unstoppable because they know how to coordinate with each other and raise hell when something is not going their way. Black people learned a lot of their raising hell strategies from them. Just ask Malcolm X. Like, we're not peeping different things. We're totally generations of people, and we peeping the same things. A lot of the Black behaviors are from them. The Black mindsets are from them. And this is why Blacks and Jewish people be like this sometimes, right? Because the Black mindset has been trained by their people. Even if we got our own little flavor, the mindset, the prescription of who we are is from them. And that's just what it is. What's going on, Aiden? I see you. Hi, what is it? Yelly Flores, entertainment as a whole, music. Exactly. Yup. MK, Jewish power comes from being one unit. Absolutely. Like, I'm never gonna knock Jewish people for staying, binding together for a common cause to have some kind of change happens in favor of your group, right? You can't knock people from doing that. You know what I mean? I think if other groups of people learn how to coordinate like that, things would be a little bit better and people wouldn't really be trying each other like that. But I think a lot of other groups don't know their power. And so, the groups that know their power, they're always going to do better. And then the ones who are stifled in their power, or if they're buying into prescriptions about who they should be or what they should be like, right? They tend to stay less empowered, if you know what I mean. But what we would be the most powerful race on the planet. Absolutely. Black people are very powerful people innately. And I think that is where the fear comes in all the time. Innately, and again, I have my opinions. I do believe that Black American bloodline of people are, and not all of them, not all Black Americans are descendants of Hebrews, but many of our people are. And the Hebrews were blessed with gifts and intuitions. And this is spoken of in the scrolls. They were born with gifts. It wasn't just that they were selected to be God's people. These people were born with very interesting talents and gifts. And I look at how people leech off of Black people intellectually, but then they have to narrate us as being inferior. You have to narrate the people that you're leeching off of as inferior so that you can look superior. But, and this is not about race superiority, but where we're talking about the Hebrews of the Bible, which are not these people, the people in Israel, these Israelis, Jewish people, They're not the people of the Bible. They're the Canaanite descendants of the Bible. They're the Edomite descendants of the Bible, and all that products of mixing. But Israel, that region, has always been a part of Africa. And the Israelites were black people. And again, I will say it again, it would be very unloving of the Most High God to position those people in that region because they don't have the paint job for it. That's why they got to get melanin just to survive, aka suntan. Like if you don't want to use any type of common sense on Israel, the Israel question, right? Just goes just straight to genetics, right? Those people should not be over there. And even with the ancient Canaanites, it was a curse for them to be over there because some of them were born with blue eyes. And then they had much lighter skin than people. They had yellow skin. The Canaanites had yellow skin. When you look at how the Egyptians depicted them, they had yellow skin and they had the eagle Achilles nose. So we know those people aren't the people of the Bible, right? Read the scrolls, all of them. But we know that Israel was part of Africa and that some black Americans, not all black Americans, some black Americans are the real descendants. And when you think about the real descendants of the Hebrews, they don't want to go back to Israel. They have no desire in their flesh or blood. Even these black people over there in Israel who say that they're the real Hebrews, even if they believe that, they're trying to establish a home in a land that the God of their forefathers has already cast judgment upon. Israel, that land, was known as an abomination of desolation in the Bible. That's what it is. It's an abomination. And this is why the Romans were sent in. And the Romans, like I said, they were not even planning on burning down the second temple. That was not their task. It was the God of the land that wanted it destroyed because it was disgusting. It was filthy and satanic. And that's why the second temple was burned. Even the Romans was like, oops. They wanted it to be a marvel. They didn't want to destroy Jerusalem. They wanted to destroy the governance in it, those who called themselves Jews. They wanted to destroy that. And after, they destroyed it finally under Titus, right? What did Hadrian do? Hadrian was so disgusted with Jerusalem, he named that whole area Palestina. So that's been Palestina since the Romans. It's been Palestina or Palestine since the Roman Empire. But again, the Romans thought that land was disgusting and defiled because they were doing shit that even the wicked ass Romans was like, what the hell? What the helly? They was like, what the hell? So if you really knew the histories, and I do invite people to read the other Dead Sea Scrolls as well, and you'll get a better, idea of those Hebrews, the ancient Hebrews, the Israelites, and then those who strayed from the way of their people, intermingled with these Canaanite and these Edomite descendants, and how they eventually overtook them. And it's kind of the same today, You'll have a black person with a great idea, they're well established, and then here comes a blockbuster Zionist trying to get their little claws on it, trying to see how they can profit from what somebody else has built. That shit has been true of the Zionists since, their existence as a lineage of people. But anyways, I don't want to get too deep into the Iraq, Iran, Israel, America shit because it's just a bunch of fuckery. That's what it is. It's a bunch of undertoned religious fuckery, right? You got a lot of satanic people that like human sacrifice. and you can maximize your human sacrifice to Satan if you're blowing up cities with civilians in it. These are fucking Satan worshipers. But anyways, I want us to practice that more. We would be the most powerful. Yep, I knew we were powerful when I figured out that they worked so hard to keep us down. I know. I mean, my thing is, if you're superior, you really don't have time to be talking about inferior people. You really don't have time to be leeching off of them. But these people got time, and they've always had time. But anyways, last spot was the India Irie and Young Miami. All right. And when Carisha first put that song out, I literally posted on Facebook. I'm old. I'm over 40, so I still use Facebook. And I'm like, it's a sad day for hip hop because Young Miami is still dropping music, right? And then when I first heard the song, I'm like, the vibe of the song is very catchy. I had to give her that. But the lyrical content was obvious something that I could not relate to. I felt like the messaging was wrong. And again, the music is the Pied Piper to the behaviors. And so let's just do a test here for a second because I don't even look at this as a song. I look at this as a jingle. So we're going to do an exercise in our childhood. So I'm a 90s baby. Okay? So if you're a 90s baby, you grew up in the 90s or whatever, this is going to be a fun little exercise for us to be nostalgic for a second. All right? So when we think about the jingles that we heard when we were kids, right? All right, I'm gonna say one, and then let's just see if you kind of know, like people who grew up in my era. All right, so the best part of waking up is blank in your cup. So that was a jingle when I grew up, right? It came on between all of my normal scheduled program, right? The best part of waking up is blank in your cup. Now, if you're like scared to engage, right, you know that the brand that I am referring to is Folgers, right? You know, if I say my baloney has a first name, it's Oscar, my baloney has a second name, it's Meyer, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? There are a lot of jingles from our childhood that we just remember. We could recite them. And there are some songs that come off right now as more jingles than songs. So when I was listening to Young Miami's song Spin That, right? I'm like, why is this shit so catchy? It's ignorant as fuck. It's glorifying the wrong things, right? Why is this song so adaptable, so catchy, and why can't I get this song out of my head? And it's because it's a jingle. That is a scammers, sex workers jingle that they have literally turned into a mainstream bop. And so a lot of people are like, well, people keep saying Young Miami is bad for the culture and that song is bad for the culture. And, what black person is going to literally go out there, listen to that song and just start boosting and scamming? And that's not really the point of the argument. I think it goes back again to music is the Pied Piper of behaviors, right? And sometimes that behavior, and it's also a form of energy harvesting. So even if you are not even if you're like, I'm not going to go out and boost, but you're singing a song, you are using your energy to harvest the promotion of that spirit and that song. Okay? And when you're harvesting that spirit, it does normalize those things. It makes them acceptable, even though they're not. And you look at a lot of people, kids, people talking about their stories of their parents, their moms being sent away to prison because they were out there boosting. JT, her Young Miami's own bandmate, was they as soon as they started kicking off their career, she went to jail for scamming. Everybody talking about free JT. Why? Because JT was out there scamming. And so to me, it's like when you think about bad association spoils useful habits, and the Bible tells us that, right? That association boils down to music. And it's the music that can start desensitizing people, really desensitizing people to certain things. And even like I've had to pray away certain songs because they were jingles to me instead of real songs. They were just catchy, and their purpose was to stay in my brain. When you hear Spin That, that is not just a song. That is a jingle, and jingles kind of stay in you even if you do not agree with the lyrics and you start singing it, dancing to it. You are giving your energy to that song, and it's harvesting. And this is why that song blew up, because it's a jingle, and it's harvesting people's energy. And so when you start seeing these people glorifying scammers and boosters and all that stuff like it's normal and ain't nothing, right? You got to think about, did I allow my energy to harvest that spirit? Because all of this is just, we're working with spirits. People don't realize that. This is why they call alcohol spirits, because you can get introduced to all kinds of spirits when you're slightly inebriated. This is why drugs, people trip, they start seeing things because they're opening up their minds to these things. So I pray that people just kind of look at things more objectively. Young Miami has admitted to being pissed on and letting men do all kinds of disgusting things to her. And we're giving a sex worker an eyesore who defended a very horrible man, because Diddy was not a good man. She's trying to separate herself from him now. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Diddy got out and Carisha was back on to getting pissed on by him. So we pray for everybody. We pray for everybody. We pray for those in the war torn countries, right now. We pray for the wicked people who are enabling war and genocide. We pray for y'all souls, right? Because, eventually, just like the devil comes to collect, God be collecting too. People don't realize that the Lord be collecting too when things, just one thing after another, is not working out for you, and you call yourself believing in God. God is not with you. That's why shit is fucked up for you. When people are truly in covenant with the Most High God, things, they do not have a succession of bad things happening. So a lot of people, when you got a succession of bad things just constantly happen to you got to dig into your own spirit. You got to search in your spirit to see, what energy am I connecting with? What spirits am I connecting with that is causing things to go the negative versus the positive for me? So that's all I have today. Folgers, that's right. And Oscar Mayer. It's funny, like when y'all start thinking about some of these songs as jingles, right? And how the devil is such a liar. He's such a liar. You know what I mean? He's such a liar. Oh, there was one more point, and I usually talk off of my written post because it's just easier. So follow my written content on here too, because I'm probably doing more of that than videos because it's just time saving and easy. And no, AI does not write anything I do, so it's going to be riddled with typos. I'm an agile writer. Last thing I wanted to say is, so again, India Ari getting backlash for her comments about Young Miami's song, and she was not calling for a boycott of this song at all. She was just talking about, from a cultural standpoint, how people who buy into this song, glorify it, support it, right? They are they are lens to a bigger problem in the black community, that we accept any old ratchet thing and normalize it. And it's sad to see old men and women bopping to this bullshit. So it shows you, that no matter how old a person gets, they can, like, sometimes they're not elevating from their mind. They're buying into every bullshit without no selection. No selection. And I find that when you get older, you should be more selective about, anything that you engage with. You know what I mean? But when there is no selection, And what you engage with, that tells me that you are not a person that is really elevating. And a lot of times where you're at in life is something that you deserve because you have not elevated, and that's just what it is. So, last point is Trick Daddy had a lot to say about India.Arie. He has a lot to say about women over 40 in general, right? And you can go look up Trick Daddy, right? Go look up Trick Daddy. He's not an attractive man. All right. He's not an attractive black man. And there are a lot of attractive black men out there. A lot of fine brothers. All right. My brother is fine as hell. I say that to say he is not an attractive black man, and he has never been a standard of attractiveness. He does not have any of the 5 social values that I talk about periodically on this channel, right? In my mind, and I don't include wealth, I'm talking about the characteristic, the aspects of a person, a human being that makes them valuable to people in society. All right? And let's run down for the new people, right? Beauty. People may hate it, but beautiful people can get by in society. They are appreciated in society. This is why we have models and all kinds of other types of, we in fashion. Beautiful people can make it into society. They can get so far, and then they have to obviously learn how to pivot from their beauty. So hopefully they're picking up some other social values to hold them down if the beauty starts to fade. If you're not beautiful, right, you have to be intelligent, okay? You have to be intelligent. You have to be able, this is where your philosophers, your teachers, right? These people come into play. People value deep thinkers, people who have the brain power to analyze things, right? So intelligence is a social value that other people in society look at as desirable and valuable, all right? If you're not intelligent, you have to have ingenuity, all right? That means that you need to know how to create stuff, right? You have engineers, carpenters, these people are valuable in society because they know how to do things that people need to have done, and so therefore they're valuable. So engineers, people who have the mindset to create something that helps society, they are valuable, right? So if you're not beautiful, you're not intelligent, you're not an engineering type of person where you can create something, right? You have to have agility, right? Agility is kind of where you get like your sports people, right? People who can compete, they can do different things with their body. They're very agile, right? With their body, and they can do things in a competitive way that entertains people. And this is where sports people, athletes, they're valuable in society, right? Because they have an ability that most people are not pushing their body to achieve, right? And if you don't have agility, you have to have a dynamic character. This is where salespeople and comics come into play, right? If you don't have any of those things, right, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be a frustrated person because there's going to be very little that people can find value in, organic value. So this is where some people, it's like, well, I will create value for myself by making a lot of money. And this is where you get the red pill manosphere guy, make a lot of money and have a nice body, and that's how you get all the girls. You know what I mean? That doesn't make you a valuable person. Like money does not make you an organically valuable person. It makes you a leverageable person, but not organically valuable. All right. And I think that's a conflation that people make in society. So I look at a guy like Trick Daddy who has so much smoke for women over 40, right? Making money for a man like him who is devoid of all of these social values, right? He thinks that, being this tricking type of guy, like his name is Trick Daddy, right? Being a Trick Daddy is not a flex. It's not a flex. And he talks shit about women over 40 because he knows that women over 40 are smart enough, and many of them are well established enough where they don't need to be tricked on. And he's going to have to come with way more value than that bullshit. And that's what make people like him angry, because he knows the young girls are only going to play him for a spell, because he knows they only want him for the money because they're tricks. Right? Tricks are for kids for a reason. And that's why Trick Daddy liked the kids. Because he know these younger girls are going to be malleable, and they're going to be only after his money, and they'll do whatever he want for a spell. But again, they don't organically want his ugly ass. He make music for ugly ass dudes who trick on women that they can't normally get because they have no other value to make them attractive to a woman. You know what I mean? So I listen to some of these dudes going on a rant about black women, women over 40, and then I just look at them, and it's always a reoccurring thing. Bald headed ass man talking about black women, low value ass man talking about black women. So, I say this to say, people listen to Trick Daddy. I never really cared for some of that Miami booty music stuff. It was like a spell growing up, and then you phase out of shit. And that's what's wrong with a lot of the artists, is they haven't phased out of that shit. You don't see a lot of growth. And so we, as the audience, we have grown up. And this is why a lot of music artists are struggling, because the people that came up with them, they grew up. They had to mature in life because they weren't some rich millionaire with a lot of access to shit. We had to grow up. We had to go out and get a skill that pay our bills and make us sustainable. And we have to interact with everyday people in a very organic way. And so when we're listening to these artists that we came up with, and they still talking about child's play shit, we can't relate to it. And this is why people like Drake is struggling, because it's like, bruh, and even Jay-Z, like, dude. And like one brother said, when you hear people like T-Pain, Jay-Z talking about, I'm rolling with these niggas, I'm rolling with, no, the fuck you're not. You're a billionaire. You're in a totally different class than these people that you still trying to relate to. Jay-Z is not rolling with shooters unless he's hiring them to whack off somebody that he don't like. But he's still not rolling them with them. He probably got a guy that knows a guy that knows a guy that can set some shit up. He's going to be 6 degrees removed from any of that shit. You know what I mean? Just like Lil Durk and Lil Baby. Once you make it, you can't talk about your niggas and your shooters and all this stuff. Bruh, you're not doing that shit anymore. We know you're not doing that shit anymore because you have money now that you don't have to do that shit. And a lot of those dudes didn't even want to do that shit. It was a means to an end. So why continue to write songs about shit that we know you're not doing? And that's the MK Ultra shit I'm talking about when it comes to what is being projected to black people and the music. They're overhyping Young Miami. They're overhyping all of these detrimental artists to the community with these detrimental messages. But I'll tell you this, I'll never forget. They know what they're doing, because I will never forget. Remember Eminem? He was talking about having his mom in the trunk and shit like that. And back then, it wasn't a lot of little black boys listened to Eminem too, but a lot of them white boys were really hard on Eminem. And that shit obviously was shaking the white family so much. The FCC had to basically put a lot of restrictions on Eminem's music. Why? Because it was trickling negatively into the white community. So they had to put a stop to that shit immediately, right? But they kept on with the black community with the bullshit, right? Black people aren't organically waking up thinking about killing each other. But if you start popularizing music to these young impressionable generations, that's really cool. You can go play Call of Duty on the streets, right? And they are making songs about this shit, glorifying it. Again, music is the Pied Piper to the behavior. These demons know what they're doing. Thank you so much, Nick, for tuning in. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. And thanks to everyone else who tuned in. I'm just catching up with my real 100ers that follow this channel. They know that I'm random. But, obviously I like to come in and just kind of talk about what's on my mind. And, it's just this world belongs to Satan. It belongs to Satan. It belongs to Satan. I'm writing an article right now on Substack called Why is the World So Wicked? I'll link it on YouTube when it's done, because I hear a lot of people ask, why does God allow this? Why does God this? Why does God this? And I always remind people, if you believe in God, you have to believe in his word. And if you believe in his word, belief in his word starts with understanding his word. And that's the missing link for a lot of people. They don't understand God's word. That's why they're asking all these questions. And it's human to ask all these questions. But, I heard one guy say, God, he was talking about what was going on in Gaza, and he was like, God, are you a P word? And I had to turn off his commentary because and immediately it took me to that scripture where it talks about in the last days the hearts of many will grow cold towards the Most High. And that was just an example like of that to me, where here you have a person who believes in God, but they are so frustrated and angry that they're talking to the Most High God any kind of way out of their frustration. And, not to say that we can't be frustrated and approach the Father, because we see Jonah did it. Jonah did it. Jonah was not with the shits trying to save them Ninevites. Okay? And I always say sometimes that I have the spirit of Jonah. And I always, bow to my Lord, because I can never have the mercy that he has. I have to, I have delayed mercy, where after I'm out of the heat of the moment, it's like, okay, you know what I mean? But, it's human to question if there is a God. Why is he allowing all of these things to, occur on the earth? And again, I always remind people that mankind does have a timeline. The Bible does outline the timeline of mankind. The statue in the book of Daniel is the hourglass for mankind. And I always have to remind them that, Daniel saw glorious empires rise and fall. And it was a repetition down to the end of times, where you get to that feet mixed with iron and clay. And that feet mixed with iron or clay is going to be a smorgasbord of world power, because not one nation will have the dominant power. It will be fragments of world power. And we see that down to our day today, even though I would say one would argue that the United States and Israel have the most power as a duo, right? This is where you get the Anglo-Saxon dual world powers, because that is what we're under right now. Anglo-Saxon dual world powers. Anglo-Saxon and Jute dual world powers. But you start thinking about that timeline, and you start thinking about the first beast that rose and fell, right? Who were those nations? Because if you don't understand the Bible, you're never going to understand what's really happening in this timeline. You got to know the nations of the first beast, because it's going to help you to really identify these nations today of the second beast, and why I argue that the second beast is comprised of Israel and the United States. These are the end time powers. And so I don't expect for anybody to think as deeply as I do, but I do believe that these generations of mankind are the judgment generations. And it's to the point where I even had the thought come into my mind, and and I keep getting the reoccurring visions of seeing Judgment Day. And what really befuddles me in this vision that I see every time, because it's always the same. It's always the same. is I am not an old woman. Like I'm not old. Like I would have thought that I would have been an old woman in these visions. I'm not an old woman. I'm not I'm older, but I'm not an old woman in my visions. And so and these are judgment times, end times. And so, for me it's like I do believe just by world events and how they're transpiring that we're the judgment generations. I think that we are going to see those bowls and those seals of judgment. And, I think that in between, you're going to see a lot of manipulations of those judgments because you have things like CERN, right? They're harvesting their little demons and the spirits of the Nephilim over there with their little God particle bullshit, you know? And then they all have all kinds of other projections that can manipulate people. But I tell you this, I don't even care if it's a black Jesus. If I see a projection of Jesus or whatever, I'm not going to believe it. I'm not going to believe it because these people are already figuring out ways to psychologically manipulate people into believing that they can artificially simulate it in time. So again, this is for the spiritually conscious folks. You guys know what I'm talking about. But the devil is busy. The devil is a liar. And all I can say is just keep your prayers up. Keep your knowledge base up of the scrolls. Grab a copy of those Dead Sea Scrolls. And like I tell people, do not read the Dead Sea Scrolls as if you are a Jew. If you read the scrolls like a Jew, you're not going to read the right messaging. You have to read the scrolls like a Hebrew. Like a Hebrew. And you have to understand with those Hebrews, and not just any Hebrew, you have to read the scrolls like a Hebrew that was in covenant, that never strayed, that never converted to Judaism. You have to read it like John the Elder, and even James. Remember, James, the brother of Jesus, said those who call themselves Jews. John, Elder John, in the Revelation said those who call themselves Jews. He was not talking about these Edomite and Canaanite converts. He was literally talking about people from their own tribe that went into Babylon with those Canaanites and Edomites and created that extension to the Hebrew faith called Judaism. Okay? So even the black folks in Ethiopia talking about they Jews, you're cut off branches. It was the Most High made it very clear to Paul, who was from the tribe of Benjamin, that anybody that converted to Judaism, who called themselves Jews, they were cut off branches from Israel, meaning they were not Israel. And that's what a lot of people miss in these conversations in the Bible. This is where you got to read the whole thing and not cherry pick, so you know exactly what these dialogues, these conversations, these conflicts are really about. Because Paul learns he was a Benjamite, he was a traitor. The Apostle Paul was a traitor to his people. He was a Pharisee, which is known as a rabbi today. Pharisees, scribes, they're all part of these little rabbinic classes, right? Paul had to be excommunicated from that shit and returned back to the way of his people. This is why he was blinded on the way to Damascus, because he had lost the way from his people. All right. So I think when you're talking about the Israel conflict, these folks who call themselves Jews being over there in Israel, right? These are convert people. They are not bloodline Israel at all. They're not bloodline Israel. And actually, you can actually still tell the bloodlines of the Israelites today because they're black, and not all black people have that signature of the Israelites either. So they're not all going to look like Africans either, right? But I can spot the Israelites today. Trust and believe. A lot of these people who say they're Hebrew Israelites, you look at their facial features, they don't fit the bill either. That's why I say not all black people or black looking people are descendants of Israelites either, because black people got here so many different ways. And I think people forget that there were black people who fled British control way before America even got established and started bringing slaves over here. There were black people already over here, and they were cohabitating with Native Americans. So, anyways, a little history as we are looking at the 250th birthday or anniversary of existence for this country. I would say America is pretty pathetic. The state of America at its 250th is pretty pathetic. It's very pathetic. And I think a lot of Americans get devoid of the patriotism. This nation is pathetic because it's run by Zionists. And every time they put their little claws on anything, it is going to be ruined. It's going to be ruined. They run the private equity, right? If you ever want to have an example of how they ruin shit, you could have a good thing in company A. The minute they get their claws into company A, it's going to go bad. They're going to siphon it, and then they're going to move on to screw on the next company, right? So y'all keep your prayers up, align with righteous people, love your neighbor as yourself. If you would not disrespect or abuse yourself, do not disrespect or abuse your neighbors. Bye.